There's one line in the sales pitch that closes more deals than I know. It's some version of what I'm hearing you say is, when a prospect feels understood, they stop defending and start buying. I've worked with startups in Silicon Valley, helping them pitch to investors. They were selling products and services, and the one thing that they always got wrong was active listening. In this video, I'm going to break down how active listening works and the habit that you need to develop to sustain active listening. The first thing to keep in mind that in sales, genuine interest is paramount. It is important because it establishes connection. You need connection before you build trust, before you let them know what product or service you're selling. And genuine interest is finding common ground. That could be around family, the location where you are, the type of food you like. Common interest could be talking about your kids. It could be a common story. Let's say both of your mothers are teachers. That's establishing common ground, because from that point, you're genuinely interested in the other person. When you're interested, the effort of communication becomes seamless. It becomes so much easier to then engage in the conversation. Now, engaging in conversation leads me to the next point, asking thought-provoking questions or open-ended questions. For example, what kind of minimal financial contribution do you need? What is most important to you? You could also discuss values. If you could rank your most important values from first to third, you want to align on the values because the collaboration becomes easier. The only way to understand that collaboration or that connection, you have to be able to ask those open-ended questions to see how both of you fit. One of my favorite open-ended question is, what inspired you to get into this line of work? I'm curious to learn about your vision. I'm curious to see what you're building. I'm genuinely curious. So if you go from the point of view of curiosity, then that other person is less likely to defend themselves. Now we get to the repeating and reflecting back to them what exactly they have said. So if the person says, I find community building important. You say, what I heard you say was that community building is important to you. Is that correct? Or I heard that community building is important. Or if you don't want to say, I heard you say, you could say, right, community building is important. In fact, it's also one of my top values. So you could repeat and reflect back to them those words or phrases. You could also say, let me get this straight to see if I understand. Community building is important to you. Is that correct? The next part of active listening is withholding judgment. And that actually is important throughout the conversation. When we judge, we have assumptions. We have biases, and then we communicate from those assumptions. We communicate from those biases. We communicate from those fears. So then we're not hearing exactly what is being present. Notice that in the sales conversation, you might have multiple conversations. You might not communicate the products and services that you offer. You may not even engage in curious ways to deliver value, for example, value exchange. For my contribution of time, I would like a maybe discount for these services. So value trade or transfer or exchange is usually beyond the services and products that you offer. What else can you offer? You can't make that offer if you didn't hear what the person has to say and what's important to them, because then you want to align the value with what they're looking for. And we're going to cover that in another video. So when you are repeating word for word what the person has said, you're in the present moment. You're less likely to miss important pieces of information. You're less likely to judge. You're more likely able to engage in curiosity. You're curious about that person's life. You will find out that beyond the sales call, you may actually set up a long-term partnership, which will create more abundance than the sale that you originally had in mind. If you want to see how these components look in practice, make sure to watch our next video on the 5 techniques of active listening. We close each episode with, do the best that you can every day.